Own the arena, get in ahead, making a difference, and succeeding as the only one. So I wrote a book. And in that book, I have 12 winning match points to help you thrive when you are the only one. But have you ever been in a room where you are the only one? Of course you have. Whether you're the only woman, the only man, the only Black person, Asian, Hispanic, other, whatever that is, we've all experienced that. But how did that make you feel? Well, for me, in my sport of tennis, I was often the only one. When I was 6 years old, I started playing tennis. And I'm from the west side of Chicago, Garfield Park. And I was introduced to the sport of tennis because my brothers were in the program for ages 9 to 18. I was only 6. I was a tag-along sister. So I had to tag along to the park every day and sit outside the fence. I was the only one sitting outside the fence, too. But I got my chance to get on the court. I got my chance to prove that I had talent. I was a tomboy. I was an athlete. But when I got out there on the court, I knew that I was destined to be a tennis player. And I didn't even know what tennis was. It wasn't something that was talked about in my community. But I took advantage of my advantage of that opportunity to play. And at the end of that summer, I got my first little trophy. First trophy. And it was because I was the most improved player of that summer camp. And that meant something to me. That was my goal. If I was like, wow, you get trophies doing this? It was also the summer that I saw Arthur Ashe winning Wimbledon in 1975 against Jimmy Connors. And I said, wow, you get to play this sport on TV? That's pretty cool. A little black and white 12-inch. But little did I know the opportunity and the journey that this sport was going to lead me down. This racket, my first real racket, I must say. The first racket was from Kmart, and then I got the Chris Evert racket. Everybody played with a Chris Evert wooden racket back then, or the Jack Kramer, but this was mine. And this is what got me to where I am today. So as the only one in my sport, see, I grew up in a Black neighborhood. I played in a Black program. My coaches were Black. The next summer was a Black program. The first tournament I played was ATA Nationals. It was a Black tournament. I didn't know tennis wasn't a Black sport. Until the next year, when I started to play USTA sanctioned tournaments and the USTA excellence programs. And I walk in. It's like, where is everybody? I'm like, okay, it's all good. Let my racket do all the talking. So I go out and I performed. And I play tournaments and I show up and I'm looking again. I'm looking up at my dad who took me and he says, it's okay, you go out and you do your best. Put your best foot forward. So, oh yeah, that's right. Okay, let's do it. So then my journey began. I learned to own my choices. I made the decision that I wanted to play tennis. It didn't matter if I was the only one, if no one else looked like me out there on the court. But I knew I loved the sport. And by owning those choices, it allowed me to take the next step forward. No one forced me to play tennis. My parents, they inspired me to do what I love to do. They made the sacrifices, they made the choices to make sure that I could continue. And so I recognized early on that I was the only one, and I had to own my identity. I had to own the identity that I was the only Black in that sport, or at that tournament, or in that age group, or whatever that might be. And as I moved on and recognized that it was okay to be different, because my difference was my strength. I was taught that. And so I believe that, and I still believe that today. But when you look at these groups of kids out there playing together, you recognize, wow, this is so beautiful. I went on to play college tennis at Northwestern University. Well, guess what? I was the only one again. But I was used to it by then. But that's where I gained my confidence. That's where I gained my courage to really move forward and recognize that my differences were my strength. But if I believed in my journey, if I believed in my ability, and if I worked really hard, anything can happen. And so when I owned my courage, I recognized that I had to work hard. I had to be prepared. I had to step out on that limb and do something different. But I also knew that in this sport, I learned early on that someone like Althea Gibson, she was the one that paved the road for me and countless others who look like me in our sport. 1950, she was allowed to play in the US LTA Nationals, which is now called the US Open. But she broke the color barrier for us. And that was an opportunity for me and others like me to play in our sport and to go beyond that. And so because of Althea Gibson, I stand here today because I was able to accomplish many things. Skydiving. I had the courage to jump out of a perfectly good plane and trust that my tandem coach was going to get me on the ground safely. And then I had these professional skydivers that were there helping me as well. I had to trust that they were going to get me down. But it's about the courage and understanding that your strength really lies within here of your training, your belief, your understanding, your preparation. When you're developing in anything, particularly in sport, common theme today, we lose a lot more than we win. And you learn from your losses. You learn more from your losses because you know that you have to go back to the drawing board. You know that you have to go back and practice and train and study or whatever that might be in order for you to get there. But before you do that, as you are moving up, you want to own your voice. Billie Jean King, one of my mentors, I'm very lucky in knowing Billie Jean King since I was about 19. She taught us that you have to know your history. In order to go anywhere, in order to excel in anything you're doing, you have to own your voice. You have to know your history. Use your voice to speak about what it is you want to accomplish. And don't be afraid to stand tall and be proud of who you are in the making of doing that. And so I played on the WTA tour for 12 years. As a professional, I won 20 doubles titles, ranked number 8 in the world in doubles, 67 in singles. A little small accomplishment. Thank you very much. But it was because of Billie Jean King and 8 other women called the Original 9 who started the WTA tour that allowed me to have a professional career, allowed me to follow my dream, allowed me to step up and step out on a limb and have the courage to go out into a world, literally a world, a new world. Coming from the west side of Chicago, I traveled all over the world, played all the Grand Slams, met some of the most amazing people in the world. But it was my platform. It was my stage. It was my comfort zone. It's where I could perform. But in that process, I made sure that I was meeting people along the way, that I was networking along the way, that I was building my network, building my village, so that I could take the next step once I retired from the tour. In owning that voice, and I retired, I became a commentator. I became the first commentator for Tennis Channel. And being the first, I was also the first Black commentator on that network. See, there's a lot of times that I'm the first of a lot of things. But in that process, I wanted to make sure that I'm not the last or the only one, that I opened the door and that I led the way and that I represented myself well so that others would have that opportunity to come behind me. I had to work twice as hard to make sure that I did things right, that I did things well, so that I could represent. And that's hard. That's not easy to do when you're the only one, because you know that you're not just there for yourself or your family or your company or organization, whoever it is, but also for a culture and a whole race of people. Because all eyes are on us. All eyes have always been on me, because as you saw earlier in that photo, when I was a junior, I was also twice as tall as my opponents, which kind of helped me win a lot of those matches because I was stronger. But you have to recognize your position and your responsibility when you are that only one. Being that only one and using your voice, I learned to own the table. Owning the table, not at the head of the table to be a chairman, but just to have a seat at the table. See, when you're invited to the table, you're invited to the table for a reason. It's because of the knowledge that you have, the expertise that you have, or something that you can share that's going to make everyone around you better. You're part of a team. And too often, people are invited to the table and walk in and have no clue as to what they're doing or what they're talking about. But when you can prepare and you go in with your knowledgeable self, you have something to offer. And so I joined the WTA board when I was a player just because I wanted to learn more about the organization, about my tour, about my profession, about the history, which prepared me further as I moved along. And then I became the president, chairman, and CEO of the U.S. Tennis Association. I was the first Black, the first former professional tennis player, the youngest, and the first to do 2 terms. Come on. Thank you. Having a seat at the table allowed me to learn. It allowed me to put my best foot forward and my best voice forward. It allowed me to recognize that I could be the leader that I was destined to be. My mom always said that I was a leader from a little age, but you have to really own it. You have to represent it. And so the possibilities of me being that chairman, president, and CEO of the USTA, gosh, look at that photo. I mean, that's 135 years to someone like me was at the mantle, was at the head of the table as a chairman, and was on center court giving the trophies out at the US Open. And the reason that I could do that, and the things that prepared me is because, one, I owned my identity, I owned my choices, I owned my voice, I owned the table, I owned my beliefs, I owned the possibilities. And to do what I did, and then to see further recently, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson become the first Black justice of the Supreme Court. Anything is possible. Nothing is impossible. And so I leave you with my quote: embrace the path that you lead and enjoy the battle. We don't know what path is going to be put before us from where we come from. But if you make the right choices and you have the courage and you put one foot in front of the other, follow that path to greatness. If you do this, and when I say do this, if you own your voice, own your courage, own your identity, own your possibilities, then you too can own your arena. Thank you.